Hey there, it's Alex. We're gonna do another personal video. This is personal video, December 12th, 2019. Yesterday, certain kind of things taking place. There was this. I'm going to try and recount as to what happened. I'm a psychic medium. I note spirits in multiple capacities. One of the things I sort of noted some of them doing it, and sometimes I'm in conversation with some of them, and I have noted some of the darker side in a certain manner. Certain kind of negativity. I've noted certain kind of psychic attack at times and things of that nature. I do defense work in a certain fashion. That doesn't warrant me being attacked over um, in multiple kinds of ways. One of the key things on that is, some took a look at certain things and said, you know what, it's not, it's not really, well, it's not worth it for some of it, but it's also there's also multiple other things that I don't deserve to be attacked, regardless if I've been attacked or not. Others don't deserve to be attacked in regards to my actions and non-actions. I do advocations throughout the day. At times, I do written advocations. I do disclaimers, testifications, things of that nature. I've put information into play in regards to earth-based disclaimers and things of that nature. But there is a myriad of different spiritual information behind the scenes regarding earth disclaimers and things of that nature, and in fashions that are, well, it's not meant to throw it at them, but it is meant to say, like, look, I don't deserve to be attacked, and I have utilized it as a defense to a certain extent. Well, no, it's not meant that way. I know this. No, that's the thing about it. Okay, then that was how we felt about it. Yesterday, there's certain spirit trying to say that somehow conversation and me defending myself during certain kind of moments that need defense, or so says, is one of those things. And I'd start to note that some were trying to go the way of labeling, like, what happens in this room isn't necessarily taking place outside of this room in a certain context, that sort of thing. That says certain spirit trying to say that, the happenings that take place in the event relayings aren't necessarily, well, that aren't true when some of them are. When some of it's not necessarily happening outside this room and outside this house and other kinds. And then that's part of the coherency and realism and understanding that, to a certain extent. And it's one of those things where I would note that certain kind of spirit are trying to, feng shui a storyline where there's that sort of thing that says, like, oh, well, all the things that he was just, it was one of those things, just a crazy in his room, and there's a bunch of things that weren't happening outside and earth based. But that's not necessarily the case in a certain context. As I've noted, I would note it, multiple times, to a certain degree. There's these big lines, and I talk about them at times. I'm liable to talk about it every day, to a certain degree. And one of them says that, I have put deployment, spiritually behind the scenes and elsewhere in regards to this life. But more importantly, there's spirit, that means spirit guides, and that have put deployment in regards to this life, to a certain extent. It doesn't mean that they own this life in regards to some of them, but it is one of those things that says that, yeah, I mean, there is deployment to a certain extent, and there's also deployment upon me when I pass on. There is that sort of thing. I don't deserve to be hurt, and it's not just deployment; it's other things too. One of the things I would note that sort of talking point had been utilized by certain spirit, when we're in conversation. They channel through, and then I answer back, and we have conversation at times. One of the things that's been is, me defending myself in regards to a certain kind of let knows and spiritual, turbulence, but also sometimes conversation in regards to, like, certain points in regards to my defense and others. That's one of them. And it's one of those things where I would start to see that, certain kind of line utilization, like, for example, that sort of thing that says, hey, what are you going to leave us down here to a certain extent? I've created physical information and things of that nature to try and help. It's not supposed to take away from certain kind of spiritual behind the scenes, that sort of thing. Says I put a disclaimer into play in regards to earth-based transportation, is not supposed to take away certain kind of information in which is for some a set standard, but also from certain authorities to a certain degree. And I am an authority in a certain manner, in a certain context pertaining to what means spirit guides needed, but there is authorities behind the scenes spiritually, in which some should be looking towards in a certain manner. I can only do so much in front of the scenes in regards to defense. I don't know some of the situations that are happening. I do have an awareness level that is heightened in regards to physical earth-based humans, but it's not necessarily near awareness levels of certain kind of spirit behind the scenes to a certain extent. So, I mean, it is one of those things. I know this from Spirit Guides are advocating for what spirit guides chose for us to advocate in regards to smart communication, etc. Guys, when you guys needed. Okay. One of the things I would note too is the thing about yeah, there was this big thing about industry, and they started bringing up big lines like forming up, you know, that sort of thing in regards to, like, it wasn't in regards to building an industry though, I don't think. And there was one thing I've noted, you know, having to do with certain kind of colors associated with certain concepts. Building and builders kind of reminds me of golden and tan and other kinds. Well, tan, yeah, there is. There's other colors too. It's not just those colors, but I was mainly associated with golden. It's a golden color. And it's a spiritual color, and it has to do with certain kinds of banners, concepts, and things of that nature behind the scenes. And yeah, I do like them. I'm a fan. Yeah, and it's just one of those things where I note that there was a certain thing in regards to certain kinds of conflict, and I'd note that sometimes there's color discernment in regards to certain kind of banners and nations and factions, concepts, and things of that nature. And that, you know, you can have a person born who kind of reminds you of like blue and black, where, you know, there might be a synergy in regards to those colors, and lower down below certain thresholds, you might see certain kind of working together. There's ones like that where you see two colors that you're associated with, and they work together in a certain sense, where upon forming up higher up, all of a sudden they you know, they don't work together anymore in regards to a certain kind of higher up forming up in regards to higher dimensional existences and things of that nature. Now, I'm not saying that that's what it is in regards to the blue and black example that I'm giving here, but it is one of them. And there's other ones too, though, for the opposite, where below certain thresholds, you'd see certain colors that are associated with certain kinds of creeds, concepts, traits, qualities, and things of that nature. And then you'd see, you know, like let's say, love and sadness. I think there might be ones like you see like a red and a blue, and you see that in certain areas that they don't necessarily work as closely together in a certain sense, and then going to another area, they form up and then they're on the same side, and all of a sudden you have it's that sort of thing where it's like, you imagine there's a certain kind of person of a certain kind of flag, and they have three colors in it, and below certain thresholds, you see those three colors work against each other in the capacities that it is. And then upon higher up forming up, all of a sudden those three colors and those banners, they form up and they work together in a certain sense. Somewhere like, why were they working against each other below certain thresholds? Well, in certain understanding certain kind of immoral culture, understanding that there is such a thing as certain kind of well, it's actually immoral culture, some of it, but there's also, like, below certain thresholds, imagine those three colors representing three nations. And sometimes, you know, they work together, but sometimes they don't. And then higher up, in higher up thresholds, they're of one banner. You know, that flag being that sort of thing. And it saves something in a certain manner, because, you know, when you think about that sort of thing that says that there is certain kind of anti-camp, certain spirit working against at times, certain kind of negative and things of that nature, sometimes in facilitating that sort of thing can lend towards a certain kind of coherency, can lend towards a certain kind of stability, can lend towards a certain kind of mending. And there's just multiple kinds of reasonings that I've seen in regards to this. And it was one of the things where it looked like, in regards to myself, or maybe in regards to someone else, there was a higher up forming up where you'd see at times, you know, this golden color and this black color work against each other. Well, and we're also work together in certain moments, and, you know, below certain thresholds, or even above certain thresholds in a certain kind of context, certain kind of lines, you know, dimensional. Well, for some of it's dimensional boundaries, but some of it's also national boundaries. And there is other ones too. Yeah, there's other boundaries as well too. And there's just a sort of thing where they sort of brought it up that somehow they're going to be, they brought it up like almost in regards to one of them, they were kind of thinking about it. And maybe it didn't have anything to do with gold or black, but one of the things they talked about or we talked about was industry. And it's one of those ones that some were saying that, whoa, wait a second. I mean, you look at certain kinds of things here and there, and there was like this lens of realism that has this clarity. It has this clarity. The thing about realism and realistic is that by way of looking at the world in a realistic tone, that there is coherency, that there is safety, and that there is a clarity. And one of my perceptions in regards to certain kinds of realism at times is this like soot black. It's almost like the goggles of somebody are a little bit obscured by way of some of the by some of this ash color, not ash black, but black. It's like a black, so it's like a dark, and it reminds me of certain kind in a certain manner. And you know, Toronto, it does remind me of it reminds me of multiple. There's also a tan color. There's a certain kind of tan of certain kind of buildings, like those old Toronto buildings. You know what I mean? That's a classic one. There's a lot of multicolor too, huge multicolor that exists. You know, gay pride parade and being liberal and all that sort of stuff. It's very colorful. And then that is the sort of vibe I get at times. Another one, black and blue. You think about the sports teams and the colors on them; those are big ones, right? And specifically the black, that black and blue, I love. Like, I mean, it's amazing, and really, really, really awesome. But then there's also another one which reminds me of something, and it has to do with a certain kind of dark, like soot. It's not soot, but it's more like a black color. There's a certain kind of gray 1990s. There's some people who know what I'm talking about in regards to a dark color pertaining to when you think of the 90s. And 1990s, that's what it reminds me of to a certain degree. So you know, I know that Women's Guides are advocating for what Women's Spirit Guides indicated in regards to the realism that Women's Guides needed and the realistic that Women's Guides needed, the Women's Guides needed. I don't think that clarity can be damaged in a certain manner, in a certain context. I think there was many safeguards and protection in play in a certain sense. I'm asking for perception to be defended and protected the way Women's Spirit Guides indicated. So yeah, I think that maybe obscure. You think about perception, and it looks like a lens of clarity to a certain degree, but it's also a way of looking at the world in a certain sense. Again, if you apply a certain color to certain kind of nations, you know, certain kind of impressions that remind you of that, you know, that can be a perception. You'll see different impressions in regards to certain things at times. Different kinds of items, different kinds of concepts. You know, you think about belief, you get that golden color. Think about forgiveness, kind of a white, certain kind of white. You think about certain movies, and sometimes the colors on the cover, you know, highlight that sort of perception in a certain manner. There's things like that. I was talking about acting right before, and I was sort of like talking about like different impressions in regards to New York and LA. LA's got the sunny disposition. New York kind of seems a bit overcast in a certain kind of manner. I think sometimes it has to do with, well, LA, I think about the sun. New York, I think about the color of the buildings to a certain degree. It's like a concrete jungle kind of thing. Yeah, sometimes I think of that. It's a good one. I don't know why. When I thought about the 90s, there is a natural color in regards to my own perception in regards to the 9. It reminds me of, it's like this black. It's like tinted water, though. It's something about that in a certain manner. And I sort of thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, but there's supposed to be, I think, a certain kind of, well, I don't know if there needs to be clarity, but it reminds me of that for some reason. You never knew why. There was a discussion about putting certain kind of water on the 90s to a certain degree, in a good context in the ways that Women's Spirit Guides indicated. And I and others from Women's Spirit Guides are advocating for what Women's Spirit Guides chose for us to advocate in regards to Toronto in the 90s, and others from Women's Spirit Guides, Women's Guides needed, because that's what they say. One of the things that took place was there was like a tornado met a hurricane. It was kind of like that sort of thing, but it was a little bit different. Well, that was one of them. That's different. That's like more like certain lyric in the song. I can't freaking remember. For some reason, the Spirit just wanted me to bring up hip hop to a certain extent, so I just thought I'd mention it to a certain degree. But one of those things where I'd noticed a certain kind of turbulence take place. Just again, certain kind trying to build up turbulence this past 3-4 days. Trying to get a certain kind of conversation, talking about big lines, that sort of thing, in a certain context. I think maybe to try and situate certain kind of spirit behind the scenes at times, and it's that conflict management style of having a reasoning for certain things to take place. But what about those who are experiencing some of that stuff? And there is those in the mix to a certain extent that are doing it in a certain fashion, in which at times needs to be exempt in the ways and means for guides needing pertaining to some of the punishment. There is certain kind of entertainment. There is certain kinds of things that are not the harms at times that some think it is. And being lumped into that thing that says we need to have being labeled something and then getting attacked for something in regards to certain things is not okay. You take a look at some of the caseworks in regards to it, and it's just no way. Another thing that came up was that global kind of feeling. They put me on global kind of platform, and I felt comfortable there to a certain degree. It was one of those things where it's like, whoa, this is more your speed in a certain manner. I kind of feel like that's where I'd want to stay. Like that's your safety. Well, I wouldn't want to go higher up above in regards to space. 3 days before that, for 3, 4, 5 days, they tried getting me talking about like certain kind of galactic kind of like positioning and other dimensional where I speak, and there's and maybe there was someone trying to let know that maybe it is, and for some to be almost a galactic sort of thing. There is spirits that look at the earth and that how they look at the earth in a certain manner would be similar to how certain physical humans look at space in a certain context. It is still within the confines of earth in a certain manner, but it's still one of those things where it's like that's some of the gravity to a certain extent. Yeah, so that was some of the stuff that happened 2, 3, 4, 5 days ago. Argumentatives tried to get going, and then I guess yesterday tried to get more big lines, because there hasn't really been too much argumentatives. It's been more of that sort of thing where a certain spirit insinuate there's attack happening, and then I'm like, I'm out for defense, and you talk about defense lines to a certain extent. Look, you tell me that I'm getting attacked behind the scenes. You tell me that certain kind of spirit behind the scenes are getting attacked, and there's a bunch of spirit that let know that I am protected, that we are protected. But there's some who don't, and there's more of the negative than there is the positive. Which you can't expect me not to respond with, I don't deserve to be attacked, bringing up certain kind of lines in regards to it. Now, that's the small of some of it, but I also talk about certain kind of lines naturally anyway, which I've been talking about. It's fairly normal from myself in regards to talking about certain things. That sort of thing. It says conversation and me speaking doesn't deserve, attack in a certain kind of context. It's just one of those things. I don't feel others deserve to be attacked in regards to my conversations and how I speak. Attachments. They tried attaching certain kind of annoyances in regards to the voice, but it was one of those things where that I don't know. I still didn't discern that there to be the kind of annoyance that some were trying to go for. So I don't know what happened there, but I think some of it was there to a certain degree, but also potentially not so in a certain manner. So maybe that attachment in regards to voice and the voice modulation, that's been one of those talking points the past couple of days. That's one of those things that I've noted where certain spiritual are attaching certain things to voice. Putting mics there is one of them, but there's also other things too. One of the big things in regards to it was that, you never knew it, Alex, but it's the way the light's hitting it. It's just, it looks pale. See, that's the thing. There you go. All right, then fine. Yeah, you know what? Yes. So it was one of those things where I noticed this like movement outwards in my voice. It felt like something broke other dimensionally. Maybe it's like a certain kind of focusing to a certain degree. I don't know if it was bad or good, but I'm adding for guys negated regarding. I've noted multiple kinds of medical observations and spiritual discernments in regards to anatomy and things of that nature. One of those things, just I've let know of it. I've done advocation. Sometimes I write it down. Sometimes I don't. One of those things to a certain degree. So I note a certain kind of spirit. There's already a bit of turbulence, and then I turned on a certain kind of content experience, and then they brought forth another kind of thing. So movement of dimensions, another kind of topic point today that's been talked about in a certain kind of manner. There's been some turbulence spiritually in a certain context that I've noted in certain ways. Again, they started talking about big things forming up, certain kind of spirit playing a certain kind of higher up interaction and events to a certain degree. Again, event utilization and utilization are big ones, but we want to defend those who are doing good in regards to it, as well as those who don't deserve harm in regards to it either. Remember, situational in regards to some of it. And maybe, what we want to address in regards to those who are forcing certain kinds, you have to utilize in a certain fashion. Ripple that a couple times wherever the heck it needs to go. And, I don't know what else to tell you. That's sort of it. I mean, this is it. The root of certain things. What exactly, we always supposed to patchwork all this sort of stuff? Like, I don't know what to tell you anymore. What is the real problem? I don't think that it's blaming certain kind of peripherals and other kinds of things that really don't really deserve blame in a certain kind of sense, in a certain manner. It's interesting that I haven't been looking for blame to a certain extent in a certain manner, like display what mean spirit guides indicated regarding. And one of those things, yesterday was one of, I kind of been staying away from looking at the original creator that says you can just save certain spirit behind the scenes in a certain context. It's a certain one where I put the blame is a portion of it on him. The original creator, that means spirit guides indicated the way that doesn't indicate. It's not the original creators that that means spirit guides indicated versus market section guides. I look at it in a certain context, and some are like, well, originals a definition. And I'm using the definition that means spirit guides indicating the light, the one that we classically use in regards to original. I could just look it up online to even see it. And it's that sort of thing that says present or existing from the beginning, first or earliest. That sort of thing where we have to understand that the aspects of the original creator could be many. So when I say original creator, that means spirit guides indicated. I should probably say aspect of the original creator, that means spirit guides indicated. That'd be probably the better way of saying. But some people say like original creator, that means spirit guides indicated. Original creator, that might mean authorities indicated. Like that sort of stuff, where that sort of stuff really does, it does matter. But when I say that I'm laying certain kind of blame on certain original creator, that means guys, it's pertaining to the aspects that means guys of the original creator. The way it means for God's name. Well, all right, then fine. So it's just, it was one of those things where I kind of stayed away from that because I know that it can be much, and it's some of the attachment behind the scenes for some of it. I think that some get upset at, and some try to pretend to be certain things and try to say that I'm saying in regards to certain things, but it's not true for some of it. And maybe, that's one of those things that, with all the bringing up of blame and some of the bad stuff that people are doing, because today some people got slammed. I was one of them in a certain sense. Yesterday early morning, when certain lines were being brought up, I noticed that we started like that sort of thing where in like a higher area, if there's going to be a working against each other at times, there's certain those banners kind of form up in a certain manner. There's forming up happening, but there's also been event streamlining, certain kind trying to fire events, certain kind trying to say certain events are taking place that aren't. I think it's trying to obscure certain events that are taking place. So, and understanding what events are taking place and what aren't, and what we don't want to have happen in the ways that mean spirit guides indicate, I think that that's important. And also hearing from those that mean spirit guides indicating versus market application extension moments or guys when you guys needed. So, yeah, it's one of those notings. For sake, seriously. It's supposed to be your good shirt, Alex. God dang it. Yes, that was exactly it. For sake. That's what they say. Another one that's been happening, talked about, is like some sort of spook or some sort of higher up spirit that's like, who's like hibernating for like, eons, and then all of a sudden he does his thing again or whatever the heck it is. There's one of those. There's that sort of thing where that they've said that I've I have like really supreme good cover in such a manner, and then also that sort of stuff that certain kind of labeling him in certain kind of manners pertaining to certain things, also lending towards certain kind of cover at times. But some of it hasn't been decent. Some of it's been crumb. It's just really, no, I can't even use, I don't even want to use that word. That's how I feel about it. Not crumb. All right, not crumb. Yeah, all right. Somebody should put that in a loop-based game. That means for guides indicated. Shim and crumb, definitely. That's how I feel about it. It's just amazing. One of the things that happened though is that when that started taking place, they started insinuating some stuff behind the scenes, and it looked like I got attacked in a certain manner, but I don't know. I'm heading for defense in regards to those images, in the moments, images, in the images. I think a lot of people were defended though. There's a lot of positivity, a lot of safety, a lot of good spirit that aren't utilizing certain kind of resources in regards to other kinds of endeavors like channeling and things of that nature, and doing other things, which will reflect when you see some of the defense works that means spirit guides indicate. I mean, one of those things where I went to somebody, and well, no, somebody, I did kind of I did go to somebody. I felt certain kind of consciousness regarding myself be shoehorned upwards up on my head area. They started trying to affect certain kind of consciousness. I felt a certain kind of moving of certain kind of consciousness. I feel like a consciousness outwards, like outwards. And I felt like a movement of some of it to the right of me in my bed in my room. That was one of them. I felt movement, spiritual, dimensional movement of certain kind of things moving away from my sister, who's handicapped, and she could very well be psychic as well too. She's blind physically. Can't move in a certain sense, certain kind of movement in the physical, and she can't fully communicate. She might be psychic as well too, and I think she is in a certain context. Some of the things, to a certain degree that they've insinuated. Another one, inner awareness waking up. Inner awareness, like I can feel inner consciousness waking up and combining with me in a certain sense. Movement of infrastructure behind the scenes. Yeah, it's one of those things that people in situation rooms are like, is this the thing? It's super, all right, well, it's the true to a certain degree. They brought up another one over there that's really crazy. That this is one of them, is that sort of thing that they brought up had to do with, there was a certain moment where I was like, I had to defend. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And some are looking at it like attack, but the way you certain spirits feng shui it behind the scenes to a certain degree is something that is not true. It'd be like that sort of thing that says, imagine somebody's trying to defend somebody in the physical, and imagine that they have the power to, in the original light, to be able to save those in the physical instantaneously if they wanted to. And certain kinds, like, you need to be able to save them. We need to be able to save them. And you can see how certain kind are like, okay, well, yeah, if you have the power to be able to save, in the physical instantaneously, why don't you just do it? And when certain kind are like, well, there's certain things in play. There's reasonings, accords, there's decent things in regards to it, and a bunch of other things. And there's ways of life, that sort of thing. But when, it's labeled as certain kind of attack in a certain sense, when certain people who are living those lives, a decent sized portion would want to be saved in a certain manner, is, upsetting to a certain degree. And I don't think it's attack if certain kind are trying to get through an area to be able to save certain kind. And it's not just in regards to the physical, it's in regards to the other dimensional too. And these are some of the concepts and talking points in regards to the spirit that I talk about at times. I like to speak about it. I like to converse. I want to be placed in the areas that me and spirit guides indicate. I want my communications to be set the way me and spirit guides indicated, etc. That me and spirit guides indicated, the way me guides indicated, and then that's etc. Or to a certain degree, etc. To find me and spirit guides. It's one of those things where it really does matter, and that etc. from spirit guides is important, because there's other ones too that some point towards and say, oh, but he didn't say this. Well, that's why there's an etc. from spirit guides to a certain degree. And some are like, could have worded it better than that. I'm like, yeah, it's still worded though. It's still decent. All right, well, whatever then. I'm a psychic medium that lets know of some of the psychic activity I'm experiencing. But I also, in understanding some of it, in understanding that there is certain kind of culture that exists behind the scenes, I started realizing that I'm sort of heading in the direction of certain kind of wording defenses and to a certain extent. And I think there's been a talking point today. Well, I want to talk about something that happened first. And it was that sort of thing that I've been able to note that certain kind of expression in regards to spirit. I've been able to note channeling through. I'd look in a mirror and I'd note certain kind of characteristics in regards to certain spirits, certain kind of energy levels and things of that nature. And when I went over there, in one of the mirrors, it was one of those things where they brought me to a certain kind of area where I was like, whoa. Well, for some of it, they brought me to a certain area, but some of it, there's a certain kind of spirit that combined with me and channeled through, and then went to a certain area in regards to my process and others in a certain sense. And it looked like that sort of thing that said, they brought up a big one, and it looked like there was a certain kind of, like, that's what they were utilizing. I don't know if it was event utilization or what it was, but the way that you can use event utilization can be as, like, this was it. This is as it, like, if that conflict took place, that would be what it is. So, you know, and I don't know if it's being utilized as an excuse in regards to certain actions and attacks or what it is, but I don't know if I don't know if I find it acceptable to a certain extent, but I might utilize that sort of thing in a certain manner too. So, I mean, what's the difference between attack and defending? What's the difference between recreational um, and other kinds? I mean, well, all right, then fine. I want to, anyway, you don't know why, because that's always it. Yeah, I feel like for industry is decent to a certain extent. I like industry set in a certain kind of manner. I like consent. I like quality of life. Um, and there is a lot of industry, you know, in the original life. Sure, there is. Oh my God, yeah, there is. And there is such a thing as resources that matter greatly. Again, one of the things I bring up is that in regards to understanding this culture, I bring up certain kind of that there is such a thing as immorality facilitation in a certain context, like certain kind of spirit and higher light can create and build advanced video games and dimensional existences as well as lives where certain spirit can experience certain kind of stimuli and certain kind of experiences that led towards being able to facilitate the ways of life pertaining to immorality. But it's not just in regards to immorality, and it could be done without anyone getting harmed, but it can also be done in regards to a certain kind of immorality attachment, like certain kind of spirit considering a certain kind of action being immoral in a certain sense to create that. Just they can do it in a certain manner where it's a small karmic hit as well, where it still counts towards certain kind of immorality, but it's still done in a safe, contained way, which can be a good alternative, good ways of life and things of that nature. One of the things I would note from it. Well, I lost the point. I don't know what they suppressed the memory. Yeah. I and others from Guides are advocating for Means Guides shows for us to advocate in regards to those that Means Guides needed in regards to smart education, etc. Guides needed. So yeah, I mean, one of the things that I noticed it was this when they talked about this aspect of the original creator taking Godspark. Well, okay, you don't know why, because this is the case list. I only go with what Mean Spirit Guides indicated. And I've said who I consider, well, no, I've already said multiple things in regards to what I consider in the ways Mean Spirit Guides indicated. I've done clarifications in regards to, who I'm going with in regards to my communications and what I'm going with in regards to what Mean Spirit Guides needed. And myself and others from our Mean Spirit Guides have done clarifications regarding in regards to ourselves in the ways that our Main Spirit Guides indicated. And those that Main Spirit Guides indicated, Main Spirit Guides are the Main Spirit Guides that Main Spirit Guides indicated in regards to smart education, etc. Main Spirit Guides needed. So it is one of those things where I would note that they're kind of taking a Godspark. Imagine that the original creator has an aspect that could take back all the Godspark in a quick amount of time, if not non-time, like instantaneously potentially, in a certain manner. But there's still moments passing. And I'm wondering if he could do it in one single moment, and he probably could. He probably has that kind of power to be able to achieve that in a certain sense. He probably wouldn't do it that way in a certain fashion because he does operate in a certain way where he contacts certain spirit first, and there'd be tea, crumpets, a bunch of other things before proceeding. There is such a thing as civility, good sir. All right, well, whatever then. Well, whatever then. You don't know why. Anyway, the idea is that there was a storyline where a certain kind of aspect of the original creator, and they brought it to me, and I felt like, in regards to defending myself, if need be, taking certain kind of Godspark, to a certain extent, and I do it in a certain fashion that means Spirit Guides indicate, because it is a touchy subject at times. It is a big one. It's like, what do you mean take Godspark? Like, there's a higher Godspark that at times could envelop certain kind of spirit that are located below, or other kinds of Godspark to a certain extent, where they, where the consciousness can be set in a certain kind of manner. And a lot of it has to do with remembrance and memory. And there's some who are worried about that sort of thing, but I do it in a certain fashion. I do it in that fashion where I look at, we can facilitate ways of life in a certain manner, but there is a certain kind of, for some of it, remembrance that should be understood for some. I mean, that is the case. Well, all right, then fine. I mean, some are looking at like me taking Godspark back, or, that higher spirit or certain kind of spirit as taking back certain kind of Godspark. In a certain fashion, which might not necessarily, and not, well, which it might not be, regarding, some are just looking at it like he just takes back Godspark. He took certain kind of spirit, like imagine someone combining with your consciousness, and then you just being, him, and he's just, moving around. But it doesn't, yeah, see, that's the perspective that it isn't necessarily that. There might be a certain kind of thing where they show certain things to that spirit, where they, well, okay, and it's not. I dislike the one which says that the not truth stuff. The not true stuff I dislike. That sort of stuff that's like, oh, you're this person. And certain God sparks like, well, okay, well, wait a second. I don't like lying in regards to it. But there is some lies in the mix in a certain context, but it's still decent in a certain manner. All right, then fine. You don't know why because you're honest about it. That's the case of it. I am honest in a certain sense because this is a big one in certain areas. The dimension. They brought it up for a certain kind of reasoning. And then they tried to, well, I was defending myself in multiple kinds of manners. Like, this is the case. It wasn't just an unblatant attack to a certain degree. And you don't know why, because this is what they're saying now. They're saying that if this is the case, then this is over, Alex. If those guys were the bad guys, then this is over. And that's true. Yeah, I don't think they're bad. That's the way I feel about it. All right, okay, fine. And of course, yeah, it was just one of those things. It was one of those things. That I noted you could talk about that. It'd be dunzos. It'd be over. I don't know if I need to. You should. You don't know why. Well, okay then. Fine. You don't know why. That is the case here. Leave it. That's the case, Liz. I know there's moments or guys are advocating for the information that may just need versus market issue etc. Yes, we display what just need. Yeah, but there is notings in regards to kind of psychic and spiritual that I'm noting, and it was just one of those things where I got to that point where I felt I'm like, there's just nothing else to do here. There's nothing else to do but me defending me and those that Main Spirit Guides indicated. That's how I felt about it, and there's that sort of thing where somebody's standing in the way of it. You've noted that sort of thing. Imagine, a certain kind of person emerges and he starts doing certain kind of things and he goes a certain kind of direction and it ends up being standing in the way of certain kind. But who's feng shuiing that standing in the way of certain kind? Because at the end of the day, it starts at the top. It always did. And that's just it. The tea and crumpets, it's been that's good, sir. We're gonna get to it for frig's sake. Right? No offense. I mean, I don't know. Like, this is the case. Did we even forget what we were doing? Wait a second. But you don't know why it is. We need to check the memory. Go and check your memories. All right, fine. That means Spirit Guides indicated. Well, you don't know why somebody got angry. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is the case of this. I feel just better when there was a certain kind of spirit around, and he still is around. This is it. Like. And there's other dimensional anatomy in certain kind of ways, and specifically in regards to myself and others, when Spirit Guides, it's set in a certain fashion, where they are around. Those powerful that are protecting me have been protecting me. And you don't know why, because that was just what happened here. And you wouldn't like some of it. Well, I go the way Main Spirit Guides indicated. I and others from Main Spirit Guides are advocating for the clarifications and information in regards to what Main Spirit Guides indicated to be displayed daily, pertaining to what Winchell doesn't need, the way Winchell doesn't need. I still feel like doing another advocation because I think that that's needed and decent. And I don't know if it's needed because there's spiritual information. I mean, this is proof that there is spiritual information regarding, right? So, I mean, I and others from Winchell Guides are advocating for the relayings of what Main Spirit Guides needed in regards to smart communication, etc. For Winchell Guides to be displayed where Winchell doesn't need it, the way Winchell doesn't need it. Anyway, that's pretty much. I went out to town. I went into town and there's a certain kind of thing taking place. I felt like there was a lot of spirit around me in a certain sense, in a certain manner, but not necessarily in a certain way that some thought. And yeah, it was one of those things where, yeah, that's the case of it. That's just what they said. So that's the case. You don't know why. That was what they said, Alex. See, this would always be why. Stop doing that. Thank you.